Dual Terminal, throughout its history, was home to many different tribes and species, from the ferocious K'Shurak to the vibrant Nixuria to the carefree Gusto. At the same time, it was also victim to many threats, from the extraterrestrial worms to the indomitable Steel Swarm. Yet, during the course of Dual Terminal 3, the final chapter in one of Yu-Gi-Oh's longest running stories, the planet would be presented probably its most evil threat of all time. Enter Tierra and the Infernoids. Now, hold up. Toon World, I could have sworn I saw El Shaddoll Construct in the thumbnail. Why are we bringing up these goobers? Well, don't worry, I wasn't clickbaiting you. I will still be talking about the Shaddolls today. But as I walk you through Dual Terminal 3, what you will discover is that although the Shaddolls were intimately involved in everything that unfolded, they aren't the true villains here. In order to understand the connection between the Shaddolls, the Infernoids, and Tierra, I need to provide you all with some background on how the Dual Terminal world operates. This is because all three are very intertwined with its dogma. Essentially, all life on the planet, regardless of its shape or size, originated from what is known as the Sacred World Tree. The tree facilitated a harmonious cycle. It would birth new creatures into the world while receiving the energy of others long past. Sephiroth and Qliphotht, as Dual Terminal's inhabitants would call it, for us onlookers, we can ascribe the common terms creation and destruction. This circle had been implemented by two gods, Sophia, goddess for rebirth, and Tierra, source of destruction. You can probably infer which of the two called dibs on either side of the spectrum. Though Sophia and Tierra had seemingly created Dual Terminal doctrines together, an ancient battle of gods led Sophia to rule over the planet. It's unclear what initially prompted this struggle. Yet, given the way Master Guide 5 details the matter, it sounded as if the two had grown greedy for dominance. Tierra was ultimately sealed away deep within the Sacred World Tree with the power of a core. In order to prevent said core from being used again, Sophia broke it into 10 pieces and scattered them across the planet. Coincidentally, the shattered core would later become the Pyrazines, or the lifeblood of the Chemnites. We'll talk more about these shiny rocks in a second. Unsurprisingly, Tierra refused to lay dormant in its cage. It was a vengeful god and still wished to spread its vision. Therefore, across aeons, it sapped away energy from the pool of the Sacred World Tree to empower itself. It bided its time, and eventually the events of Dual Terminal 2 presented Tierra a prime opportunity. Sophia, not too long after their clash, had gone into a deep slumber. It reappeared amidst the plague of the Evil Swarm in hopes of resetting the world. Think Evangelion type vibes. The tribe of the surface united to rebel against the act. Naturally, they didn't want to die. They wouldn't let a god control them and sought to write their own destinies. Constellar Somber and Evil Swarm Kyrkion in particular, two warriors chosen to ascend the mortal plane, led the front to fell Sophia and prevent its mandate. They inherited the god's power and ushered in what they believed to be eternal peace to the rescued lands. But unbeknownst to them, Tierra began plotting its liberation. The Fiend pursued three goals. 1. Reactivate Qliphotht or destruction. 2. Regain the 10 pieces of the core that bound it. And 3. Obtain Sophia's power to break free. Decades passed following Sophia's defeat. Many of the heroes from Dual Terminal 2 aged. Gishki Avance and Gishki Emilia became great sorcerer of the Necros and dance princes of the Necros, founding the Necros tribe. Their child, Shurit, strategist of the Necros, possessed the capacity to summon the 3 ancient Ice Barrier dragons. Kamui, Hope of Gusto, became Ritual Beast Tamer Elder and adopted orphans of the old wars under the new title of Ritual Beast. Somber and Kyrkion remained relatively unchanged and served as beacons for Dual Terminal citizens. The two noticed, however, that their powers had diminished over time. Believing this to be an omen that Sophia might somehow return, Somber returned to the Sacred World Tree to make the necessary preparations. Using the Pyrocene she had inherited from her fallen Chemnite companions, Wink Wink, she created the Yangzings as a precaution. Kyrkion, on the other hand, traveled to the Mist Valley marshlands to investigate the mysterious sighting of a long-dead warrior, Chemnite Master Diamond. For some brief context, Chemnite Master Diamond had been a valiant soldier during the events of Dual Terminal 2. Formerly Chemnite Crystal, he was one of the brightest among his people and was beloved by all of his friends. In order to vanquish the Evil Swarm, he had received 8 of the 10 Pyrazines of the Chemnites and transcended into the wondrous form you are seeing on screen. Unfortunately, Diamond had been fatally wounded in battle and passed on the Pyrazines to Somber so she could complete his mission. He was supposed to be dead, and by the time Kyrkion reached the marshlands, this was still the case. Because instead of being face to face with Diamond, Kyrkion found Cairn Gorgon, Antiluminescent Knight, a horrendous shell of his comrade. How could such an abomination exist? Well, like many of the points I'll bring up in this video, Tierra was to blame. In addition to leeching energy away from the Sacred World Tree, the god had tampered with the cycle of life. If you recall what I said at the start of this video, normally organisms that died would return to the tree and be converted into raw energy that could be stored away or molded into something new. Tierra, as soon as Sophia was felled, meddled with this process, trapping the souls of the dead in the capsules of its slumbering infernoids. The excess life energy attached to these souls continued down their path but was effectively incomplete. It couldn't be properly recycled into the tree's reservoirs and was considered repulsive. So that energy was spatted back into the world of the living, taking the form of the corpses of what they once belonged to. These husks lacked any consciousness bar an innate desire to be reborn. Like moths to a flame, they marched towards the tree in hopes of salvation. Welcome to the Shaddoll archetype, my friends. I'll challenge you all to guess which Shaddoll corresponds to which dual terminal character in the comments below. Kerkyon engaged Karen Gorgon, trying to protect what lives still remained in the marshlands, but he could not deliver the final blow to end the monster. Diamond had been one of his closest comrades. Even if this mutilated amalgamation wasn't him, Kerkyon could still see his face in his figure. The hero's hesitation cost him his life as Karen Gorgon absorbed him without remorse. The powers of Sophia inside of Kerkyon melded with the atrocity, converting it into Shaddoll Core. Core served as a catalyst for the creation of more Shadolls, all of which now formed a gruesome army marching on the Sacred World Tree. Somber's Yang Zings fought their hardest to stop a new threat. Since they hadn't been designed with the Shadolls in mind, however, the sheer number of enemies was too overwhelming. This prompted Somber to descend to the heavens and gather star energy. She was able to materialize a 9th Yang Zing, Qi-Wen, Light of the Yang Zing, whose otherworldly powers bolstered that of its predecessors. Qi-Wen quickly combined with the other Yang Zings to create Baxia, Brightness of the Yang Zing, who proved much more effective against the Shadolls. I find it a neat coincidence that the actual Synchro monster can bounce cards on the field, which invalidates the majority of Shaddoll monster effects in duels. Somber would also relinquish the power of the Constellars she once harbored, allowing the remains of those angels to be renewed as the Teller Knights. Together, the Yang Zings and Teller Knights fought as one, intent on protecting the Sacred World Tree at all costs. At first, all went well, but in the middle of the battle, one Teller Knight, Unukalhai, would fall victim to the Shadolls. See, Kerkyon, like Somber, had received some of the Constellar's powers during Dual Terminal 2. By absorbing him, Karen Gorgon didn't just receive Sophia's abilities, but also gain access to that untapped heavenly potential. Unukalhai recognized this and brazenly tried to free Kerkyon. His efforts did allow the Teller Knights to regain Kerkyon's staff, which they employed to assemble Stellar Knight Deltaros. But Unukalhai became Shaddoll Squamata, an occurrence that proved devastating. What you need to realize is that the Shadolls, in absorbing a Teller Knight, gained their power, namely that of connecting the stars. This is the common trend you're going to keep seeing. The Shadolls munch on something and level up. Squamata was immediately able to fuse with Bixie, Water of the Yang Zing, spawning Zhao-Tu, Darkness of the Yang Zing. The Yang Zings, as were the cores inside them, connected to one another. Should one turn, the others would turn too. And so these worms, initially founded by Somber to defend the Sacred World Tree, now stood to destroy it. Hell broke out on the battlefield. The Teller Knights were put on the defensive as Yazi, Evil of the Yang Zing, charged at them. They desperately called upon the Ritual Beast and the Necros for aid. A makeshift alliance was formed reminiscent of those from eras past, set on defending the tree from its aggressors. And it actually proved quite effective. In spite of the tribes not knowing the true intention behind the Shaddoll's assault, wink wink, they courageously held their ground. This level of resistance was a surprise to Tierra. It hadn't expected such an organized opposition to its plans. It grew restless. The cores were right there on the surface just waiting to be seized, but the dense conflict muddied any chance of acquiring them cleanly. So Tierra issued a command. The Shaddoll were to capture Ritual Beast Tamer Wen. Another lore dump tangent, Wen was born a prodigy in the spiritual arts. Her innate talent scared those around her, including her own parents, who abandoned her when she was young. Elder found her and took her in, allowing her to grow up as a beloved member of the Ritual Beast. Returning to the story at hand, Tierra believed Wen's immense spiritual energy might be enough to break into the deepest corridors of the Sacred World Tree. El Shaddoll Winda could then activate the Qliphothr system, which would automatically seize the cores, and Wen was indeed present in the fight, aiding the Alliance. So, when the chance struck, the Shadolls captured the girl and forcibly made her into El Shaddoll Wendigo. The unwilling betrayer dove into the depths of the tree and allowed her hollow companion to reactivate the Qliphothr system. Suddenly, the towering icon of Dual Terminal ripped itself from the ground and floated high into the sky. It absorbed the 8 cores of the Yang Zing and 2 others within the Shaddoll core and El Shaddoll construct, booting up the Qliphothr. Not to be confused with Qliphoth, despite that being the OCG name for the archetype, the Qliphothr were machines responsible for maintaining Dual Terminal's cycle of life. They weren't necessarily good or bad, they simply existed to carry out their programming. Incidentally, the Shadolls were not a natural component of the cycle. The fact these revenant souls were lodged inside the tree, but their bodies were still living in a sense was a paradox, a glitch in the Matrix. So the Qliphort's first act was to purge them. One by one, the Shaddolls were plucked from the ground, imprisoned in the machine's tubes. The masses that once troubled the Alliance were humbled rapidly. Construct, the strongest among the Shaddolls at this point, did prove troublesome, but was ultimately surmounted. It couldn't be absorbed, so with the help of Shuret and his connection to the Ice Barrier Dragons, it was frozen in the form of Shekinaga. When it came time for the Qliphorts to absorb Winda, however, the situation flipped on its head. See, the reason why Winda was able to activate Qliphoth in the first place was because Sophia's aura was imprinted into her. In her past life as Winda, Priestess of the Gusto, she had been killed during the God's Awakening. She was so close to Ground Zero that she was imbued with Sophia's mark. This is why Tierra had intentionally brought Winda back as a Shaddol. By absorbing the shell of the girl, a proxy vessel of their creators, the Qliphorts were made vulnerable. Tierra infiltrated their coding and hacked the sacred world tree. Under its control, the Infernoids were finally unleashed. Though they sympathize with Tierra's vision, and though Infernoid Tierra is a fusion monster that can be made by combining the appropriate names, Infernoids should be considered their own sentient race. They aren't extensions of Tierra. They originate from what is called the Void, though I generally don't have too many details on what that actually means. I try to make this distinction because of events that transgress in the epilogue of the story. You'll understand what I mean if you stick around. Anyhow, as Tierra had sucked up the energy from the Sacred World Tree across aeons, the Infernoids stole the souls of the Shaddolls the Qliphorts had collected. As they did so, they brought the flames of the Void to the world, setting it ablaze. The Qliphorts, meanwhile, were at an impasse, not just because Tierra was slowly rewiring their minds, but also because of their encounter with Winda. According to the Qliphort source code, Sophia and Tierra were the only established gods of the world. The fact Winda radiated a similar aura to them, the machines reached the conclusion that there was a fatal error in the cycle of life. And so they did what you might do when presented a similar debacle: commit mass genocide. Not of a specific tribe as the Gishi had done in the past, go check out that video by the way, but of all life in the world. The surface would be purified of any anomalies until all was right again. Interestingly, Qliphort Monolith details this event. You can see that his flavor text attempts to communicate a message its system might have registered at the moment. Furthermore, and do note that I take no credit for this piece of trivia as I am citing the Yu-Gi-Oh organization, but the subsequent lines of what looks like gibberish actually have a translation. Written in Atbash cipher, Monolith reads the following: "Contact with the sacred tree is forbidden. The scourge has been unleashed," which sounds pretty neat until you read the Japanese text. Pretty damn metal, right? Another reason why TCG localizations are garbage. Back to our regularly scheduled program though, the remaining members of the Alliance scrambled to adapt to the situation. Not only had they lost the Yangzing, but they had now lost the Qliphort and were also at odds with the Infernoid. The Necros, using the powers of their mirrors passed down from the Ice Barrier, decided to call upon the dead to fight. Since the encounter with Karen Gorgon had started this mess, Shemknight Master Diamond was revived to atone. Diamond, convening with the Tellarknights, combined with Sirius, Procyon, Capella, Rigel, and two Teller Rings to become the legendary divine dragon Stellar Knight Constellar Diamond. I find it a bit ironic that this card, in-game, negates dark monster effects despite none of the Qliphort or Infernoid names being dark, though maybe that was intentional. Constellar Diamond helped rally the allies and effectively push back waves on waves of Infernoids and Qliphort. Soon, however, it was faced with the mighty Infernoid Ananku. Uncertain on how to surpass the brute, Diamond called upon Somber, who offered her aid one last time. She materialized one final Yangzing, Denglong, origin of the Yangzing. With her powers of creation exhausted, Somber also combined with Constellar Diamond and the remaining Tellarknights to form Tellarknight Ptolemaeus. At this point, the story gets a little convoluted in the sense that Tierra is put on the back burner. But just remember that everything that happened from here on was technically started by the god. Ptolemaeus and Denglong prevailed in vanquishing Ananku and the majority of the Infernoids together. For a moment, the Alliance celebrated, believing they finally achieved victory. But Shuret noticed the powers of the three Ice Barrier Dragons disappearing from his grasp. Confused, he and his allies scoured the battlefield, only to find that one Infernoid was missing: Infernoid Deviati. Deviati had started collecting the vacuum tubes of its kind in secret and made its way to the original location where the Ice Barrier Dragons were sealed. It sapped their rage, channeling it into Shekinaga. El Shaddol Anoyotilis was born thereafter. Anoyotilis, when printed, wasn't the best fusion monster for its archetype. It was sure as heck a beast in lore though. The behemoth was on the level, if not stronger than Construct, which makes some sense since it partially is that Shaddol. The Alliance barely scraped by. Dance Princess had to channel Sophia to become Necros of Sophia and held off Anoyatelis while her comrades put together the Dragunity Divine Lance with the souls of the Dragunity. Notably, in addition to the 10 cores already held by the tree, the entirety of Sophia's powers were concentrated in this battle, whereas before they were scattered. The sheer aura emanating from this gathering triggered another node in the Sacred World tree. Zephyra was activated, an additional defense mechanism behind Qliphort intended to protect the structure at its worst. Recognizing Anoyatelis as a planet-ending threat, the tree promoted the likes of 10 holy warriors from the surface: Zephyr-Thubin, Zephyraxiton, Zephyr-Naga, Zephyr-Kor, Zephyraxi, Zephyr-Neo, Zephyr-Saber, Zephyraxa, Zephyr-Pilica, and Zephyr-Wendy were born. The Zephyra turned the tides of the conflict. They stalled Anoyatelis from getting closer to the tree, giving Sophia and Ptolemaeus enough time to empower the Divine Lance and launch it into the Abomination's chest. As Anoyatelis fell, only the head of Debiati, Infernoid Decatron, remained. But that was all Tierra needed. The god beckoned Decatron in his last moments to finish what it had started. The Infernoid gave up everything to provide Tierra a temporary body in Infernoid Tierra. The god's fleeting physical form gave it enough time to take hold of the other half of Sophia's powers and finally set itself free. This was done through Ptolemaeus. Remember El Shaddoll construct from earlier? In a previous life, it had been Chemnite Lapis, twin to Chemnite Lazuli, who had become Somber. Tierra intended to bait Ptolemaeus, who had a part of Somber fused to her, into conceding Sophia's powers. And so, through a really convoluted set of steps, it took Lapis's enslaved soul and transmuted it into Dark Tellarknight Batlamias. Tierra's intuition was on the dot. Ptolemaeus was drawn to her sister. With the 10 cores and Sophia's influence under its wing, Tierra, source of destruction, finally glared down on the world from the heavens. Paralleling the final events of Dual Terminal 2, Tierra was set on completely destroying the world. Unlike Sophia, however, it had no intentions to create something of the aftermath. If the god succeeded, everything would cease to exist. This was it. There was no turning back. The Alliance and the Zephyr had to do something, or else all of their work up until this point would have been in vain. Ptolemaeus, before being taken by Tierra, fortunately was able to release the powers of the Yingzings back to the Sacred World Tree's Sephiroth system. This action activated a hidden initiative, the 11th Zephyra, granting the 10 existing Zephyra the power to merge into Zephyrath. What few people on Dual Terminal surface were still alive at this point were witness to the planet's deadliest clash. For 1,000 days and 1,000 nights, Tierra and Zephyrath were locked in an intense struggle. This is literally what is written into the Master Guide, by the way. I'm not making it up. The exchange shook the entire planet to its roots, effectively reshaping its geography for good. On the dawn of the day after, Tierra and Zephyrath were nowhere to be seen. Only the Sacred World Tree, what inhabitants it protected, and 2 Chemnites remained. Zephyrath had prevailed. The 10 warriors, though gone, would be remembered for all of eternity. The few individuals trapped in the Infernoid's tubes were freed, either to be granted a second chance at life or to be allowed to finally rest in the afterlife. Dual Terminal was now a godless land, where its citizens truly held their futures in the palms of their hands. In the epilogue, Ritual Beast Tamer Lara inherited the power of Keeper of the Sacred Tree. She became Spiritual Beast Tamer Lara, the new leader of the Ritual Beasts. In response, the spirits of 2 lingering Yangzings challenged her authority. That of Water of the Yangzing, that had first been corrupted into Zhao-Tu, and Shadow of the Yangzing. Lara, demonstrating her prowess cultivated during the war, was ultimately able to best them and bring them under her command. As a heroine rose, darkness fell. Excluding Decatron, who is technically only Debiati's head, note that there are 10 main deck Infernoid monsters. Deep inside of the void of the Sacred World Tree, a hidden 11th Infernoid stirred. Its form hadn't been complete during Tierra's resurrection, and so it wasn't able to participate. But finally, Infernoid evil awoke, possibly spurred by Lara's actions. Evil fled to the ruins where the rest of its kind had fallen. It preyed upon the leftover Infernoid's cores, slowly amassing the strength to lash back at the tribes. Whether out of revenge or out of sheer adherence to the principles of the void it originated from, it eventually grew into Infernoid Flood. Knowing it was her responsibility to lead the world forward, Lara would challenge Flood to protect the path her predecessors had paved for her. The conclusion to this exchange remains a mystery. Now, hopefully you all understand what I was talking about at the start of this video. Shaddolls were a vital part of Dual Terminal 3, but they were more a victim than an aggressor. Instead, you can just blame Tierra and Infernoids for everything. I've played during Duelist Alliance format, and the archetype always stuck out to me for its incredibly unique card design. I couldn't quite afford the Fiends back then because I was an unemployed high school student. By the time they were cheap and I had the money, my mind was on different decks. But between the unbanning of grass in the TCG and the release of new support in Battle Selection, or the recent pack if you're playing Master Duel, I really wanted to give Noid some love. So I hope you found what I had to say interesting and learned something from it. If you enjoyed the way the story was presented, remember to like the video and subscribe. I'll definitely be doing more voiceovers for Yu-Gi-Oh's many stories in the future. There's a Patreon link below if you wish to support me, also a Discord link if you seek to chat about all things Yu-Gi-Oh! Otherwise, I hope you have a good night.